Welcome to the People Like You podcast, the podcast for people like you with businesses like yours. This week's guest is Kirsty Nash. Kirsty is an accountant and content creator. Kirsty's unusual combination of expertise in both the creator space and accountancy gives her a unique understanding of the issues facing sole traders and content creators. So, Kirsty, why don't you start off by telling everybody who you are and what you do?
Yep. So I am basically Tiny Shark Accounting. So I am an accountant. I qualified a few years ago, always worked in the field, and last year decided to take the leap, I guess, to work for myself, and went full-time self-employed in January 2024, so just a couple of months ago.
So why the air quotes full-time?
Because it doesn't, well, it's early days. It doesn't feel like it's quite a full-time gig yet, and I'm dabbling in loads of other things as well, so
But it is your full-time gig.
yes,
It's just new.
yes, just very new.
That's great. So as you are Tiny Shark Accounting, why don't you tell us why people should need an accountant? What's the benefit?
Yeah, of course. So I'll try to make this not sound like a sales gig. I may be biased, but I'll go into this trying to sort of advise people as much as possible. I really think there's such a huge value in working with an accountant. Even myself as a small business owner now, maybe in your own experiences, Mike, you'll find that when you set up on your own doing freelance work, whatever it might be, you have to do everything. And there's a real danger that you dabble and you don't quite do anything to 100%. And I think it's really important when it comes to your taxes, your accounts, looking at your numbers generally, that you get it right and it's a proactive relationship rather than a reactive relationship, because that's when you're going to be getting the most value out of doing your accounts and doing your tax before the fact.
Before the deadline's approaching.
Before the deadline, or even a year after the deadline.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you know, there will be opportunities that you've missed, costs, things like expenses that you could put into the company that maybe you didn't quite realise. The list really does just go on. And I think that even just outside of those filings, like the things that you have to do, you can get analysis. You can sit down and maybe speak to your accountant maybe once a month, once a quarter, and see, what have I earned the most money from? What have I spent too much money on? What can I do? What can I change to improve the performance, improve the longevity of a business? And in those early days, it's so important to get right, because you could, you know, do everything right outside of maybe spending or controlling or cash flow. And those are the things that really, you know, will make or break your business.
Interesting. Because I suppose a lot of people would think, and I would think, you get somewhat towards the time you've got to do your self-assessment, and then you hand over all your receipts and your invoices and whatnot, and then it's done for another year. But you're talking about more of an ongoing relationship. And so with that then, what kind of benefits to the people who do that kind of thing? What do they get versus the people who would just go at the end of the process and do it then?
Sure. So probably two main things really. Number one is that proactive relationship to it all. An accountant will maybe see that you're, you're working from home and you've not accounted for a cost for that, or that you're considering buying a car for the business, and how can we best treat that? Is it best to put that in this year or next year, and look at capital allowances and all of these other huge things that come into tax? So rather than, as we say, like a year later going, oh, what did I do? It's what can I do? And that's such a huge like mental shift. And I think that comes with having like a good relationship with a professional, someone that you don't just speak to once a year after the fact, but rather you check in every now and then. You see maybe what the accountant is posting on social media, and if there's anything relevant to you that you can sort of think, actually, I should be doing that, or I could be doing this. I think a huge part of it as well, though, is just accountability. I think especially for like solopreneurs and people that are doing their own thing, having someone just be like, have you done this? Do you need to do this? Can you send me this? Can you consider this? Can actually be quite a big game changer for people.
That's interesting. It's funny when you're saying that. I was thinking there are a lot of parallels with. Obviously, I'm a web designer, and you often find out that someone you've been working with has got some business idea that they've suddenly done, haven't talked to you about it, and then you could have helped them with the marketing or the promotion via the website. It sounds like a similar thing in terms of accounting. There's things, I guess, is what people or businesses don't know that they could get help with, I suppose.
Exactly. Yes.
It's interesting. And so you've worked for different accountancy firms, I suppose.
Yep.
So what made you take the leap to go freelance in the end?
Yeah. To be honest, I wanted to give it a go. I wanted to, do all the big things people say. I wanted to be my own boss and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But I've always worked in practice until like the last 2 years of my career, where I moved into industry, and I think that just really made me realize that I missed like working with clients, working with people, and sort of making more of a difference myself. Because when you're, a cog in the machine, you're helping the shareholders and whoever else. I want to make a difference with people like us that want to go into business and want to, make it a success. So I think that was just a really big shift. And then I guess alongside that, people started to find out that I was an accountant in certain circles. So there were like questions and things that kind of came out of that.
So it's kind of like being able to give that more personal relationship, I guess.
Yes, huge thing.
Which I suppose is quite a difference from the usual perception of an accountant as quite a stuffy business. So I guess you're trying to shift it into a more personable kind of thing.
Yeah. I do think lots of accountants are making that shift. But it will be a generational thing. It will take time. Lots of like if I think of a typical accountant, I'll think sort of like a white older guy who's maybe coming up to retirement. And, you think they're not going to be invested in you personally, especially if you're a younger person.
In my head, they've got a bowler hat and a monocle.
Yeah, I mean, like we should be moving away from that, because there are so many like great accountants out there that are trying to do different things. So yeah,
that makes perfect sense. And so you've mentioned, I guess, solopreneurs and kind of small businesses. So are they the kind of people that you're working with?
Yes, yeah. And like everyone sort of says, "What's your ideal client?" when you talk to accountants and stuff like that.
That phrase I've heard so many times over the past year. I can't tell you.
When you're starting a business, what is your ideal client?
It's anyone with money.
I just need to pay the bills. But yeah, I think it comes back to wanting to make that impact on somebody. And if it's someone that I can relate to, I can get to know them, I can get to know their business, and hopefully they like me as a person. We can build like a really good professional relationship. We will both get way more out of that than maybe a slightly less personable relationship, or the more traditional sort of business transactional relationship.
More of a kind of faceless company.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the difference, isn't it?
Yes. So yeah, my ideal client, if I had to put something on it, were like maybe younger people who have ideas and want to do their own thing, create businesses, but maybe just need a bit of support with the numbers.
Interesting. And so how did you start to make that switch over then from the working for a regular company to going your own way?
So I was actually very lucky. My employer at the time let me go down to, say, part-time hours. And that was when I started doing the legwork, to get everything set up that you have to. The list is endless, and I don't think it will ever end. But slightly before that, going back slightly, I really started to think about it when I found that friends and acquaintances and contacts in the creator space learned that I was an accountant. It would be something as innocent as I tweeted something on my personal account about taxes or something, and people would sort of message me and be like, "Oh, can you help with this thing?" And I'm like, "Oh,
You didn't expect that to be the most popular tweet.
No, I really didn't." And there were a couple, and I just remember thinking maybe there is a need here, especially in that creator space where there's not a big profile, or accountants maybe are a bit lacking in that knowledge.
So that's interesting then, because I would assume people from that kind of content creator background, a lot of them start it as a hobby, or it is just a hobby, until it becomes bigger, and then it becomes maybe a bit more than that.
Yes.
So I guess, what do these people often not know what mistakes are they making.
Yeah, I mean, you've nailed one of them right there. I think for loads of content creators, it is as innocent as, they have an Instagram where they post pictures of their cat and it's for fun, or maybe they start playing video games on Twitch and suddenly they're monetized. But it's where do we, change from a hobby where you happen to be making a little bit of money here and there to, do I actually need to do a self-assessment tax return? Do I need to file my taxes? Do I need to consider becoming a limited company and all of these other things that kind of come from it? So yeah, I think really that's the starting point, like the guidance of you actually have to do something here.
Yeah, this is a serious business now.
Yeah, this is a business. I do say that quite a lot to people. Like, you might be a content creator, you might just stream games or make YouTube videos, but there is a point where it does transition, I think, from just something on the side that you're doing for a bit of fun where you happen to make a little bit of money to something maybe a bit bigger where you're thinking, I could do this part-time. Could I do this as a full-time thing in the future? And I think at that point, you really do need to think about it differently and look at your numbers and get an accountant.
But I suppose also there's the professionalization of what people are doing, but it's also a case of you don't want to end up getting fined or having that money taken off you at some point because you didn't know that you had to be paying tax on it, I suppose.
Yes, and a lot of the messages that I was getting from people, especially initially, was I didn't realize that I had to do this, and it's been 2-3 years, and now you've got this situation where you need to make it right. So
yeah, I can imagine there's be a lot of people in that same position. Yeah, so it's a good job you're around. So, so you mentioned obviously content creators there. So I'd imagine a lot of, like, let's say more traditional businesses, it's kind of almost, I say, common knowledge what things can be expensed, what things they've got to pay money on. But content creators, that's a kind of a newer business, if you want to call it a business. So what kind of things do they look out for in that respect?
So I've had some strange questions from people where you have to really think, okay, what do we do about this one? But it all comes back to if it's for business use. And I think this is a big stumbling block where the creator industry is so young, because it's such a young industry that even HMRC, like, I've had stories from people where they've called up HMRC and like asked them questions and they don't know what to do about it.
Well, I was wondering if they would know.
Because people don't understand. They don't understand what Patreon is. They don't understand like the complexities of being paid from like the US and other bits and pieces. So yeah, I kind of forgot what the question was.
Yeah, so no, but that's all very interesting, and is, like you say, it's all quite muddied and what's for personal use and what isn't. Have you got any examples of anything that was kind of a borderline that you...
Yes.
And what happened with it?
So I had one even just last week. I had a call from a client and they sort of said, this is a really random question. Like, I just want to check this with you. They are setting up like an office space, which is for business use.
Sure.
And they wanted to decorate with Warhammer stuff. So like, can we expense like the Warhammer like miniatures?
Wow.
And we had a good conversation about it. I sort of said, it comes back to business use, personal use. As long as you're not going to spend your weekends painting these like for personal enjoyment, they are just there. Like, you're going to use them in your content. You're going to do, back shots or whatever it might be. Like, that's going to be fine. Yeah. So yeah, it just really depends. And lots of streamers on Twitch, they play video games.
Yeah.
So it's like another really good example where if you're just streaming this game, like it's just for your business, just for your trade, then yeah, that's a business expense. So yeah, you might be buying the newest, whatever it is.
But presumably the guys who stream on Twitch and they're playing the video games, presumably they don't just do it for Twitch and for business purposes. Presumably they do it for fun when they're not streaming. So where does the line fall on that?
Sure. So I think it depends on what the expense is. So even myself, like if I'm streaming a game, I will exclusively play that on stream. So that's quite a nice clear distinction as to actually, yes, that all relates to the content and the work and the trade. My computer is a different beast, because yes, I use it for content a lot, but I also use it myself personally. So that's when you have to look at, say, like the hours that you're spending streaming, like the actual percentage of the time that you're using the computer for, and sort of apportion it on that kind of basis.
Well, it's interesting because I would have thought it would have been one or the other, but you can kind of split it in some way, you say. Okay, interesting. And so you work with a lot of content creators and Twitch streamers and things like that. So I know you're a content creator yourself, so why don't you tell us a bit about what that side of what you do?
Sure. So yeah, basically I'm a big nerd. I have been streaming video games and other random bits and pieces on Twitch. It was like the first platform that I really, I guess, got established on. More recently, I've started doing YouTube, so making videos basically where I watch anime and people watch me watching anime.
So it's a watch along kind of thing.
Yes,
See? Oh, right.
yeah. And I've always dabbled in other bits and pieces, but like video games, anime, like that kind of sphere of nerdiness is just an absolute love of mine.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, it's like we were talking about before with like an ideal client. That's your niche. You probably didn't start out thinking of it as a niche. It's just something that you enjoy, and then other people enjoy watching you do these things.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's quite incredible. So many people have started to make careers doing things like that, doing things that they love.
Yeah.
Have you done anything like? Because I would imagine it started off as a hobby and things like that, but was there a stage where you started to take it more seriously and try to start building an audience?
Yeah.
Or did it all happen by magic?
So, well, I'd love to say that there was a magical story to it. I guess it kind of tied into when I wanted to create Tiny Shack Accounting, because I stream, I've got a great community, it's monetized. That's a great sort of support really for going self-employed, because I know at least there's a little bit that's coming in. And I think this year and sort of going self-employed is probably where I'm going to try and ramp it up a little bit, whilst trying to make sure I manage the business, obviously. So yeah, I don't feel like there's ever a point really where I feel like I've made it, or like I'm a professional, because I don't feel like that ever comes.
As a streamer?
Well, I think as a streamer, but even as a business owner, I think imposter syndrome is something that everybody fights a little bit.
I was about to say, it's that word, that phrase, imposter syndrome, that everybody has to struggle with.
Yes, everyone, even if it's a small thing, a small feeling that you can manage, or like this encompassing thing that you wake up every day and you think, should I be doing this? Am I doing this? Am I the right person? I feel like everybody has that a little bit.
I think especially if you're a one-man band, so to speak.
Yeah.
Everything is down to you. The success or failure of whatever you do is down to you. And then it's like, can you do it?
Which is why, again, to go back to working with, say, an accountant, it doesn't even need to be an accountant. It could be a bookkeeper, but someone that I guess you're partnering with, not as a business partner as such, but someone that will help you, that you can bounce off, someone that you can say, oh, this month maybe wasn't, as good. Like, what can I do about it? So helpful having that kind of soundboard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the thing, I guess, about freelancing or solopreneurs, whatever you want to term it. You start off thinking you're going to be on your own, but realistically, you go further and better when you have other people you can call on. You
need to find your people.
Yeah.
Honestly, it can be very lonely, I will say. So networking, finding other young like business owners, solopreneurs, freelancers has been really beneficial for me.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because I mean, I've done a lot of networking over the past year while I've been freelancing, and people have said, it's like, isn't it lonely as a freelancer? But I said to them, I've been to so many networking events. I feel like I see more people now than I did when I worked for the company. Especially as the last company I worked for, I was remote anyway. That was in a way a lot more lonely, because I just talked to my colleagues, finished, and that's it.
Yeah, very true.
But with freelancing and having your own business, you're always having to speak to loads of different people, I think. So, but I do understand the loneliness aspect, because it certainly can be that way. But as you say, going to networking events and having other professional people to work with is a massive help all the time, I think.
Absolutely.
Cool. So what I find interesting is the shift from content creator to becoming an accountant for content creators. So was there a reason that happened, or was it well, tell me.
Yeah, of course. So historically, the many years that I've been doing both of these things, content and accounting, I'd always kept them very separate for professional reasons. I worked with lots of older accountants that maybe wouldn't understand the content sphere, which again is a factor in all of this. But as the two worlds eventually kind of came together, that was when I sort of thought I could actually help other content creators, even if it's just a tweet here and there or something on Instagram, or, something that just raises the awareness of, yes, you've got your tax return, or there's double taxation, or there's expenses and all of these other bits and pieces. I think just having a figure will be really beneficial. So yeah, it was kind of, that sense of feeling like I could make a difference.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned something there. You mentioned double taxation, and that sounds like a very scary couple of words. So why don't you tell everyone how to avoid that?
Sure. So it's very prevalent for Twitch streamers, is where it's kind of blown up a little bit. Twitch is a US company. When you monetize your content on Twitch, you have to do certain taxation forms and apply for this whole thing. And part of that is telling Twitch where you're from. So in the UK, and the US have a double taxation agreement, which basically means that you won't be taxed in both countries. But if you don't do that correctly, Twitch takes 30% of your income. So you get sent what's left. And then you might be like, well, what do I do with that? Like, that shouldn't happen. How do I correct this in my tax return? And it was quite a big thing, actually, that blew up on Twitter, and has a few times, where streamers realized that they were being taken, a 30% cut was being taken out of their income that shouldn't have been. And how do they fix that?
Wow. That must have been a horrible stomach-dropping moment when they found that out.
Yeah, and especially for people, who are full-time, who, we're not talking about small amounts of money. It's quite a scary realization to think, oh, how do I, like, what can I do about it?
God, that's terrifying. And so is that something that you can rectify after the fact, or is it something that you have to get right from the start?
Preferably from the start. If you fall into this, you basically have two options. You can set up in the US, apply to the IRS, and get a refund. So far, I know nobody that has managed to do this.
I was going to say, that sounds like a hell of a long process.
It's a long process. There's so many details in there that just make it almost impossible, really, to do. Or what you can do is, after the fact, in your UK tax return, you can put an adjustment in for foreign income that has been taxed. So you don't get the money back, but you can offset it against any tax that you have to pay, which isn't ideal still. If you're talking about big lumps of money historically, people need to pay their bills, like cost of living, all these other things. But there's no way around it.
Wow. Well, make sure you sort that out then.
Check your tax forms.
Cool. Well, Kirsty, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And before you go, just say to everybody watching and listening what you can do and where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tiny Shark Accounting, if you're interested in the accounting world, you can find me at tinysharkaccounting.co.uk or Tiny Shark Accounts on Twitter. So slightly different handle. If you're interested in the content, can I plug that?
Yes, of course you can. Plug what you want. Keep going.
It's Tiny Shark Plays on Twitter, Instagram, and on Twitch. So yeah, go check this out.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's been good. Thank you so much.